Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can get more information about Office Hours at officehours.global. First hour is a general discussion about any questions that you have around media or virtual production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to start off the week with talking to Hasmukh Gajjar from South Africa. He had his own very successful virtual event or digital first event a couple months ago and a couple months ago. And he's going to break it down for us and talk through it and really talk about what worked and where he's going from there. Tomorrow, new video from our own remotes. So they're going to be joining us and talking about the video for Virtual Insanity, which they had released as a song earlier this summer. And then Wednesday, we're going to talk about NAB and how we might cover it as a group. So we'll be doing some brainstorming on Wednesday. Thursday, we're going to talk about the business of live streaming. It was a heavily requested subject for us. And so we're going to talk about what it takes to actually have a business doing live streaming. And then Friday, we'll talk about the Belfast Method. We are slowly taking over a venue in Belfast, switching from one country, calling it from another country, watching it, on YouTube. And we're going to talk about just where we are right now. It's not done yet, but we're going to kind of give you an update on how it's going. Saturday is a long day, of course. We'll have education. We don't stream that part. That's at 8 o'clock. We're taking Unreal off this week. Nick isn't available this week, so we'll take 1 week off on the Unreal. And then we'll have Belfast Project. And then at noon, we'll be cooking with Damayanti Gajjar again, which is, we're having a great time. I'm making a lot of good food. So anyway, that's all I know. Anyway, it's good. It's a good Saturday. All right, let's jump into the questions, Bill.
First question this morning comes from Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas, and he says, how does the OC White Ultima underslung mic arm compare to the Elgato Wave Low Profile mic arm?
Go ahead, David.
I think I can't speak to the quality, but there are two big differences. One is that the Elgato is only $100, and the second is that the Elgato is currently out of stock, and they have no news on when it's coming back in stock.
Go ahead, Jason.
I'd say the major difference is that the Wave mic arm is a traditional kind of scissor thing, whereas this guy is completely underslung. It's much lower. Plus, it also holds microphones that are twice the weight. So 2.2 versus well over 5 pounds.
Go ahead, Bill.
So in the old days, there was really only OC White and a couple other companies, and they made these industrial arms that were generally for radio stations and things like that. Now that podcasting has taken off, there are a lot of companies who are in the low end of this that never used to be, specifically things like the Blue Compass, and Rode has one. And so you can find a lot of mic arms. You will find over the course of the time that the more you spend, and if you get up into the true professional things, they are really thoughtless boom arms in the sense that they never make noise. They always allow you to position a mic and it just stays wherever you put it. The less expensive ones, there are compromises, and I've watched a couple of YouTube videos over the last month or two where they do them head to head, and you'll see that almost everything else other than the high end has compromises. Whether that matters to you is up to you. So they can still hold a mic fine, but the little things just aren't the same.
And I think that these are the LP, which is the lower profile arm, looks very much like the OC White. The one thing that's missing is there's one extra joint, which may seem like or maybe two extra joints at the end of the OC. So that's when I look at I don't have the Elgato, I have the OC, but the OC has one joint at the very end when I have two more joints, which allows me to get my mic in I have a little bit more articulation right at the very end, but otherwise it looks very similar. So it'll be interesting to see, but I think that's probably the biggest difference. It could probably work. I have to admit that I went through 3 or 4 mic arms trying to avoid buying the OC, and finally just gave up and just like, okay, I'm going to stop experimenting. And so I've been pretty happy since, but it is a lot more expensive. Okay, let's go to the next question.
Rupert McCrae is up next from Dallas. The new 12-inch teleprompter, a new 12-inch teleprompter has popped up on Amazon. It's called the ToucLait, starting at $99 and has now risen to $120. It's designed to be used with a tablet, but will easily take a lightweight monitor. Any thoughts on this style and price? And then he's got a link there of some sort.
Go ahead, Aaron.
So I know a lot of these are coming out lately. Jeffrey, I think, has the same one, and he seems to like it just fine. I have the the Glide Gear TMP100. It's pretty much the same construction. And then I use this little 10-inch monitor. You can certainly use an iPad if you want. I like monitors better. They work better. So the money is in the monitor, not in the teleprompter device itself, I think.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
The main warning sign for me on this one is that it has an adjustable glass angle, which to me feels like a bit of a weird, kind of strange no-no. It's encouraging you to put the monitor at an angle that isn't going to be quite right. It also doesn't say whether it's 70-30 or 60-40, which is a big no-no. Prompter People makes one that is almost exactly the same size. I have one of those plus a huge one over here, and I'm partial to them.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I'm going to take an opposing point of view to Mr. Beish and say that an adjustable mirror angle is one of the things that all the teleprompters that I've designed have that a lot of teleprompters don't. And the thing that it allows you to do is to compensate for different size monitors, because I have one of those little glide gears. I bought it to look at it, and any monitor I put on it, it was so fixed where you could put the monitor that if you put a larger size monitor, half of it was cut off and you could not adjust the angle of the mirror, and you could not move it in relationship to the mirror. So adjusting the angle helps you accommodate different size monitors, and that's why that's very important. It also affects if you're using it as a teleprompter and you're mounting it on, let's say, a jib arm, and you're doing a high angle shot where the person has to read it, start high and read the teleprompter as it comes down. If you can't adjust the mirror angle, they won't be able to see most of the screen when the jib arm is other than eye level. So this one does not have an adjustable angle on it. The $119 one, I think the $200 one does.
I will defer, of course, to probably one of the experts in the field.
Go ahead, Will.
I was going to say, I'm not going to speak to the quality of the monitor, but watch out. This is kind of screams them trying to manipulate the Amazon listings. I just looked up the price history, and there is no high price history since it was just recently listed, and it already has. It started at $70, went up to $180. Now it's saying it's $120. There's a coupon, so it seems like I'd keep an eye on it. If this is something you want to buy and you're very price sensitive, I'd wait a couple weeks and see what happens. There's a site called Camel that'll let you monitor what the actual price is and where they try to manipulate the listings.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Yep, I actually did order one and even got a 10% coupon, so I got it for like $90. It did arrive. I haven't set it up yet, but I'll report back.
Yeah, we definitely want to know what you think of it, because it'd be cool to have something. I think that when you look at a lot of these teleprompters, you go, well, we've thought for years that you could make this for less. Like it's just because it wasn't mass produced. That it was expensive, and the glass. So the thing that really makes a difference a lot of times, the pieces themselves are pretty simple, and you think that this could be done at a higher, at a lower rate, but the glass makes a big difference too. So it'll be interesting to see how the glass looks going through that. All right, next question.
Mike Emmett in Melbourne, Australia is up next. A new 4K webcam called the Lumina has popped up, promising color correction by recognition of a supplied color chart, amongst other features, like a Sony sensor and a center stage like auto reframing. Does the panel have any thoughts about this?
Leo?
Yeah, so start with the good news and the bad news. We'll start with the fact is this is on Indiegogo. So the question is, will this turn up? But let's actually look at some of the points that they said. So they've got this color correction. So you hold up a card, which you hold up to the screen, and you'll see that what actually happens is it reads the QR code and then it color corrects itself, which actually does make a lot of sense. And it's something that I've been thinking about. Why isn't that more in there when you recognize those sort of things? And I can see that happening more and more often in there. So that makes sense. Then they always talk about bokeh. It always appears, that every single new camera says they're going to deliver this. And then you look at the actual layout of the camera, which you can see at the top here. It's a long, thin camera. So it isn't got, if the lens was on the other way around, it would make more sense to me that it could do this, but I don't know how they're going to do it on there. But as I said, the worry is I can't remember how many things that I've ordered on Indiegogo that some appear and lots of them don't.
I will say that I feel like they put an awful, so there's two different kinds of companies that go on Indiegogo or Kickstarter. One kind of company is not sure if they can actually make it, and they're trying to get enough money to build it. Other companies use Indiegogo and Kickstart as a PR campaign. I would say that this one, with the amount of work that was put into the web pages, this is a PR campaign. They're not trying. They don't need your money. Like they've already gone down the path of building something out and going through industrial design and everything else. I think that my guess is that it's probably just they're just doing Indiegogo to get more people. And that was something that we saw a lot of in the past, but then to Leo's point, it got a bad reputation. My only consideration is that when they say it'll active calibration, the end product is very low quality. So when they do the color correction and then there's no whites, it's like it's all gray. It doesn't actually get to and it makes it worse when you're on a white page. You can really see the fact that it's not really properly exposing. So I'm curious as to what would actually happen. As is always the case, I'll probably end up buying one and trying it because I keep on going through ones trying to find something better than a Brio, but I haven't successfully made the turn. All right, next question.
We're up to Charlie Dancaro in Melbourne, Australia as well. And Charlie says, looking for a mount for a webcam with a standard tripod mount, such as the HuddleCamHD, to hang underneath a TV via a VESA mount, screws perhaps. Any suggestions?
Go, Jason.
Under gets a little bit tricky, but the easiest possible way to do this is with a hardware store. It's hard to describe, but basically it's flat figure 8 looking pieces of steel. I use them between roof rafters to put cable conduits. Put it straight down and then simply get a 1/4-20 bolt. If you're looking for more than that, Hide It Mounts has a number of really good things that'll connect anything to a VESA mount.
Yeah, go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, I think what Jason's referring to is sometimes called punched bar or stamped plate or something like that. So you may be able to look up that. But what I do for trying to mount stuff behind anything that's VESA mounted, it kind of depends on what you've got going back there. But I use sometimes these things. It's a VESA offset plate, which will go between your current VESA mount and your TV, and then give you a offset VESA plate, which you can then attach all kinds of other mounts to. So that gives you a solid surface to get some kind of hardware back there. And then for mounting a camera like under the TV, particularly if the 1/4-20 is on the bottom of the camera, I sometimes use one of these, which is just a low profile 90-degree bracket where you can just screw the camera in, underneath and then slip the bracket up behind whatever you're mounting on. And then I'd probably use a combination of magic arms or whatever I can get back there to connect those two pieces.
For some reason, when you showed that, what popped into my head is I have never thought of building a VESA mounted cheese plate for the back of a TV or a monitor. I'm sorry, must go to CNC now. Because of the idea of having like a bunch of like 3/4 or 2/3 inch and 1/4-20 things, and you just mount it in, and then you have like anything you want to grab onto would be.
You should see the back of my TV. That's basically all I have. It's
but
just
I'm saying
completely all mounted.
But you could have a little metal plate that just had all that stuff set up so that you could just put it on the back of every TV, and then anytime you want to do something to it, you just add things to it. Just saying, somebody needs to do that. I'm not going to get around to it for a little while. I've got a couple things in front of me. All right, next question.
David Paskin here on the panel from Miami, Florida says, interested in portable production monitors to use with my MacBook Pro, understanding that I'll need a displaylink to connect more than one.
So David, do you want to elaborate on portable production monitors?
Sure. I shouldn't use the word production monitor. I'm looking for additional displays to use with my MacBook Pro so that I can have, Mukana on one and Zoom on the other. And
okay, so just another monitor. You're just looking for an external monitor.
Portable external monitors, yeah.
But when you say portable, what do you mean by portable? Because they're all portable. I mean, you can put them in a box.
I want to be able to throw it in my backpack and take it with me.
Copy that. Possible. All right. Go ahead, Bill.
So I have probably 4 that I'm looking at, and the one that I've enjoyed the most, it's not the most color accurate. So if you're looking for a quote monitor that you want to see colors on, it's hard. But these new IPS panels are really pretty good. I have one from a company called Kogoda, Kogoda, that has worked really well for me. It's on an arm to the left. It uses USB-C or USB-A. It has both connectors on it. And so I'm using that on the left side of my screen to do some of my monitoring stuff. And then on the right, I've decided to go with Sidecar and my iPad Pro. And so that makes a real simple, the connection that uses just a standard Apple Lightning cable. So you can do that with those simple connections. And then HDMI, you can also use an HDMI splitter, which I use to do the main computer out into 2 monitors, my overhead that I can use for reading things and looking at diagrams, and the teleprompter that's directly ahead of me.
So, Courtney?
Yeah, I've been buying a lot of these portable monitors that are just fold up flat, and they're very thin, about 1/4 of an inch thick. They do not have a VESA mount on them, but they have that little leather cover with a magnetic attachment on the back that folds into that stand like that. It's about $179. It hooks up over HDMI or USB-C. If you hook it up over USB-C to your Mac, I believe it'll work with a Mac. I plug it into my PCs. It will power it and send the video signal to it, so it's just a single cable. It has speakers in it as well, and it has a little hole on the right-hand side. Looks like a bullet went through it. No, it's you can stick a pin through it to use it as a prop to hold it up on a flat desk. And if I want to mount them on a Magic Arm or something, I have my own 3D printed VESA mounts that I stick on the back with command strips.
Go ahead, Jason.
A word of caution about the cheaper end monitors, and of course it's not your specified use case, but if you're going to plug it into the HDMI out of an atem mini, understand that a lot of these panels will only run at 1080-60. If you need 1080-30 or 1080-2997, make sure that it absolutely specifically says that it'll work with that.
Yeah, the ones that we've used in the past a lot are Lilliputs. I know a lot of other people use Feel Worlds, so those are all but Lilliputs. I mean, I've probably owned 100 of them. As inexpensive. I need an extra monitor over here. I need to see something over there. The one thing that we do with a lot of our monitors when we say that they're going to be portable is we put a little bit of Velcro on the front of the monitors, and we cut a piece of plexiglass. And we put a little Velcro on that and then snap it onto the front. So every time we throw it into the back, there's a lot of ways you can pack it, but having a hard piece of something on top of the screen increases the length of its usefulness for about 10x. so it just doesn't get scratched, doesn't get broken, we found that we were having lots of monitors getting broken in shipment, and we started putting the plexiglass on the front of them when we put them into a case, and it doesn't look as nice when you pop them open, but it also is a place that you can stick other things if you need to, because you'll have a receiver there. Go ahead, Will.
I was just going to ask, are you looking for critical monitoring, or is this just a monitor, like you said, Macon at the chat room? Because then Sidecar or something like AirParrot might work with an iPad.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be critical. I use my iPad for content, so I'm trying to avoid using an iPad.
Yeah. No, I think that's what we use these little Lilliputs for, and the Feel Worlds I know other people have used is not something. It's kind of an expendable monitor that is that just has extra data. We put clocks on it, and feedback. Next question.
Next question comes from Leo Mindell here on the panel from Pinner in the UK, and he says the latest episode of Last Week in Office Hours is ready. He's got the link there, edited by a new After Hours member, Rotem Kish. Can we ask for Office Hours members to watch and feedback tomorrow?
Yes, we can. Yeah, so please check that out. We just put it into Makana, so go ahead and check that out later, maybe after this show. But check it out and give us some feedback on it, and we'll talk about it more tomorrow. Absolutely. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is up next with, could a Dugan or similar auto mixer be useful when you don't have multiple open mics in the same space? For example, audio feeds from ZoomISO or Zoom Room sources and so forth.
Go ahead, Jason.
In my experience, the Dugan auto mixing system can be used to do just about anything if it's calibrated correctly, but this use case seems a little bit weird to me. I don't know.
We actually use it a fair bit for exactly that issue, which is to if you've got more than one person coming in, just pushing one down and one up is fine. Where we really use Dugan probably more than anything else is bringing a remote participant into a room of live participants for a hybrid. So where you need to push the mics on the stage down when someone's speaking and push that person down when someone on the stage is speaking. And that has been a really successful use case of the Dugan. Go ahead, Leo.
That's exactly the use case I was going to give. When you have one person that's remote and you've got multiple people in the room and you put them in the same auto mix. So if you're using an XR18 as an example, you can use any channel. If you're using X32 as an example, you can only use the first 8 channels. So you have to put the mic, you have to put the Zoom room in the first 8.
I would have thrown to you earlier if you raised your hand earlier. The panelists are really behind. It makes it much harder for me to do what I'm doing here if you guys don't get ahead. All right, next question.
Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida is up next. And he says, getting started with Unreal Engine, any recommendations for a minimum system? Thanks.
Go ahead, Aaron.
So I have a lot of game developer friends who use HP Z laptops and workstations, as well as the Dell Precision, I think 5280 with the big thing is you need at least 4 cores and 8 gig of RAM on your GPU, and you'll be fine. I use G4D and AWS instances when I'm doing mine because I don't like hardware in my house heating up my house. But those are definitely options from people that do this stuff for a living.
Yeah, I mean, I have the one that I use Unreal on that I built years ago is a AMD Threadripper with the last generation of Threadripper and 1080 card. Yeah, so it's a little older and it works fine. So it's got a lot of beef to it. But I mean,
yeah, you want to use RTX cards at this point if you can get them.
If you can get them, but you're going to find when you talk about getting started, probably not the 1080 is probably too old, but the next round is probably enough to at least get started on it. Next question.
Mark McCain in Austin, Texas is up next. He says, good morning. I imagine this has been covered many times. In terms of the audio chain, how are the Waves Loudness Meter signals integrated into the office hours?
Go ahead, Hasmukh.
Yeah, I don't know if Mark has watched the mic checks before the show. So we do that just to level the loudness of everybody's mics at an equal target, and we aim for -24. And the meters are brought into the meeting from an attendee machine, and that is screen scraped in that setup and put into the meeting. So it allows us to have effective audio, which is the most important thing in any meeting.
Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer, back from Vieira, Florida, and he says, has anyone used this $90 SDI camera, and thoughts on a quality? And it's the Mocus security sensitivity camera that we've heard about a little bit.
I thought, Courtney, didn't you have that camera? There we go.
No, I didn't have that one. I had this one here, which is a HDMI out, and the one that they're showing there, which looks like this on the back, is a SDI or composite video out, but it does say it's 1080p. That's for $90. It'd be interesting. A lot of they're having problems with HD SDI for security cameras not necessarily meeting all the specs of general broadcast SDI. So try it out and make sure it works with whatever switcher you have. The timing may not be right for a normal SDI switcher unless it does automatic resynchronization.
Josh?
And I don't have personal experience with this camera, but there was a YouTuber, AJ the CEO, that reviewed it, and out of the box it had some funky colors, and then eventually he he was able to tame it down a little bit, and it shows some comparison with some other Sony cameras. I'll leave a link in the Makana chat.
Great. Next question.
Graham Cardwell is up next from Belfast, Northern Ireland, and he says a LUFS, LUFTS, LFKFS, and DB. What's the difference, and is there a simple conversion calculation?
I would ask that one tomorrow. So I think you might. I don't know if anyone here is ready to jump on that one and explain it in a precise way, but we have a lot of audio folks here tomorrow. So so ask it again. In fact, let's go ahead and send that one. I'll cancel, send back. We'll send it. We'll even send it right back to you. Sorry, we don't have our heavy audio engineers here today. Next question.
JHB in New York City is up next. He says, watch the Belfast project over the weekend. Congrats. Shot call was via office hours. Was the actual switching done at remote locations as well, or was the sound mixing done on site? Thanks.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, both the switching and the sound mixing was done remotely using a combination of either client remote access VPN or, in my case, site-to-site VPN, and we used a mix of X32 Edit, atem software control, and in my case, the Blackmagic Advanced Panel.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Yep, that's what I was going to say. So we're good.
The thing to look at is if you watch the Tony Mobley show, is one version of this that's all in the cloud, and then you watch the Belfast Method, and you see a different way of actually running hardware. The consistency is not whether it's hardware or software that we're running. What's consistent is that the people running it will be all over the world. It's pretty exciting to kind of see this slowly progressing into the situation where anybody can be anywhere running either the hardware on site or the hardware or software in the cloud. It's good. I would definitely keep watching it. And we're going to talk about the Belfast Method on Friday. We'll kind of just trade notes of where we are right now. All right, next question.
Comes from Rupert McRae here on the panel from Dallas, Texas. When configuring capture sources in a software switcher, there are options for video format, MPEG, M264 or YUV, color space, Rec 709 or 601, and color range, full or partial. What are some ideal settings for sources like the Brio and the Camlink?
Go ahead, Jason.
All right, I'll take a stab at this. All webcams are going to be MPEG. Color space Rec 709 is the standard. And in this case, full or partial is referring to the broadcast safe colors. So in this case, I would say partial to conform it, but yeah, that one's dealer's choice.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I mean, anything in computer world will normally be RGB, not YUV. And color space should be probably 709, although 601 is probably fine for most webcam-y stuff. They're going to be most in JPEG, not MPEG. Some of them can be in H.264 mode, but you probably don't want to use that because it causes frame dropouts if your computer can't handle it. Most in JPEG is easy for computers to deal with.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he asks, would the Belfast Method or the Mobley Process be used for other types of content like sports?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I'd like to see this in like the insert studio kind of space, just a facility somewhere where anybody could drop in a few people and a remote team could take over and produce a event or a contribution to a show.
Yeah, go ahead, Leon.
So, yes, it is already in some extent. So Sky Sports have moved and transitioned all of their sports production over to vMix in the cloud for their live events or some live events. However, there's a big difference. The comms and the way that they do it in the version of what we were doing is completely different. They've got to be far faster. Anybody who's ever watched production of sports in particular will know that the cutting and the transitions, everything is running at 1,000 miles faster than we were running on anything that we're running. And that would present, the way we were doing it would probably present too many barriers to the way that sports is delivered.
Yeah, it's also like sheer number of cameras and so on and so forth for doing something, starts to come up on the higher level of sports. So in what we see is some college networks are basically backhauling all the cameras back to a central location. That way they can still have a pretty fast cut because the editor is just still cutting as needed, into that process. That's all fiber uncompressed, coming back to the remote site. And one network, I don't know if I should say who, but they're doing over 2,000 shows. They've been doing that for a decade, over 2,000 shows a year. But those are they're smaller sports. They satisfy a bunch of legal requirements in the United States around coverage of sports, and so they just make way for the fact that they still send a truck to the football games. It's pretty common in sports to do what we call REMI, how we tend to refer back to that. But I think that there are so many places. Sports is one place, but there are so many opportunities for using the kind of methods that we're using there, whether it's for concerts, but also discussion. There's a lot of it that's available potentially if we're not constrained by trying to find people to do it. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I think latency also plays a bigger part in sports. You want to try to be within, a quarter of a second or so for it to really go well.
Next question.
Moving on to David Paskin here on the panel from Miami, Florida. Yesterday, the Streamdeck XL popped up on Amazon for $100. Turned out to be a scam. How does Amazon weed out bad actors and protect us from making bad purchases?
Go ahead, George.
I can neither confirm nor deny that a few of us have ordered a few of those. But Amazon does a good job of doing the refunds. And obviously, there's quite a few of us that have already flagged that particular seller, but we'll see if the delivery comes this week, but I'll keep you updated.
Rupert?
Yeah, there's all kinds of algorithmic things that go on here. User feedback is one, the star rating, people asking for refunds, orders that get declined on cards that turn out to be reported to be stolen, all kinds of things. But these Amazon Marketplace sellers, the third-party sellers that aren't necessarily through Prime, they need to maintain a certain rating. And as they drop down in that rating, the weight at which the algorithm will get applied to them just gets heavier and heavier. So it's just, it's automated in a lot of ways.
Aaron?
So they use a service called Amazon Fraud or AWS Fraud Protection. You can go look at it. You can buy it yourself. You can implement it yourself. That is exactly what they use on the back end. It isn't perfect. Humans are still in the loop and will be for a while. And fraud is just a game you have to play if you're in that business.
Anytime you see a huge number drop and it's not coming from being sold by the owner of the hardware, you're probably in trouble. Go ahead, Bill.
I also think they keep track of your account in terms of how much you buy and whether you're a good customer. And if you are, their return policy is insanely liberal. I've had tons of stuff that I've sent back and
I just throw things back in the box. Like
they don't care. In fact, they just say, keep it, don't send it back. We'll send you another one, make it right. They just don't want to have the hassle. And you think about it now with COVID, why would they want a ton of stuff coming back into the warehouses? If you're a good customer and have a good reputation, they will just send you stuff. And if you say it's bad, they will replace it.
And also people who really are doing business on Amazon will do a lot to keep their rating. I had a bike or whatever that I put a bad rating. I put a bad thing up about because I didn't like it. And they were like, hey, can we send you some money to take that down? And I was like, no, that's what happened. I was like, if you want to send me a new bike, that's great, but I'm not going to take $50.
Which is another kind of fraud.
Another kind of fraud, and I didn't do it. But there was one where they sent me one where it was missing an entire screw hole, like they hadn't drilled it, into the thing, and I didn't want to go through the process of sending it back because I just drilled a hole and fixed it. But I said, hey, you sent me one without a hole in it. I don't really want to send this back. Is there some way you just send me a new one? Just send me another one. I was talking directly to the manufacturer, and I said, I haven't written a review yet. They said, we'll get one right out to you. And then they just sent me two. Let's just keep that guy happy. So anyway, the next question. Oh, Courtney, go ahead, Courtney.
I was just going to say, we still don't know if it's an actual scam or just kind of scam, or if it's B stock, and a lot of these Chinese manufacturers, what they'll do is after they run a product for an American, for another company, will sell what's remaining on the line to wholesalers, and people will fix them up or repair them or get them working again and sell them on eBay. And this may be what that is.
Yeah. Next question.
Adrian Allback is up next from Brisbane, Australia. And he says, is there any known issues with the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K connecting to an ATEM Mini? We've tried several HDMI cables in all inputs, but they still won't talk to each other.
Go ahead, George.
Just need to check and make sure that the pocket camera is set. What are you using, 1080p 30 or 60? Make sure they both are set at the same resolution. Also, what I've found that if you go into a converter, make sure that converter is set up, whether it's on one to communicate, to make sure it matches the input. But I'm using a pocket and I haven't had any issues with the ISO.
And I don't have much experience with the 4K. I can't say with the 6K. I've never had a 6K that you plugged in and didn't see it. That's the one thing it does, is it goes, oh, I can see the switcher. So it does seem like you might have a bad. One thing I would do is I would take the camera and plug it into a monitor and see if it shows up. So set it to something that the monitor will see, like 1080 60 or something, and plug it in and just see if something shows up. It could be a bad port, bad HDMI port. Go next question.
Our friend George Kennedy Jr. here in the panel from Washington, D.C. says, Alex, how will ZoomISO change the remote production landscape once fully vetted? The potential is massive and the feature set keeps growing.
Hasmukh?
Yeah, I watched Chris Fenwick set up his ZoomISO on a Streamdeck and Companion last week in After Hours. And as I listened to him, I was just as intrigued, and probably I want to add to the question that George is asking. For my medical event, because of COVID, we've been very reluctant to go to the hospital and do the meetings from there. And if my understanding is correct, the talent or attendees can be in the same meeting, and you ISO pull out the individuals based on target ID or gallery position, and then ISO them and feed them out into your own meeting. So that has huge potential, because then, like you did, Alex, you had the attendees or remote attendees call in through a separate machine and then bring them into your event. This may obviate all of that. So I'm not sure. So I have the same question as George has.
George, did you want to add anything to
that? Sure. Once you get past setting up the first thing you need to understand, and I had that issue too, is understanding that the ISO part is a matrix that you can use with vMix or ATEM or any switcher. Once you get those two parts, understand those two parts and get it going, it's very fluid. Obviously, the struggle for me right now is that the ATEM Mini ISO is limited to 4, the Super Source, just 4 boxes, and you can only do so much, but obviously you can route things. vMix is a little bit more better. You have a lot more flexibility. Also, I think the features that Andy keeps adding is going to really add to the whole overall experience. Right. And once he's able to deliver this to the cloud, I think that's where it's really going to shine. It's going to shine either way. I think if you have a constellation, as Alex is working with, the potential is so great, and we're going to see that with Office Hours 2.0. But I think once it gets to the cloud, we're really going to see it explode into more usage. But Andy is really doing a good job. And I think one more thing that and Greg Gibson demoed this, and I was able to replicate it, is if we're on a panel here and you raise your hand, you're going to be able to see on the stream deck turns from red to yellow, and you'll be able to see who raised their hand on the panel. You could just push them to a source input or ISO input, either on the ATEM Mini or vMix. So those are those are micro workflows. But I know Alex is going to be able to talk about this later on once we get 2.0 going.
Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely show what we're doing. The couple of advantages that we still use for a lot of our major events, we still use isolated actual computers. And the reason we do that is because the audio is still muxed together. So, all the channels are muxed, and even the new, even taking it, I don't know, but I think that even where ZoomISO is going with isolated audio, it's not truly isolated audio. It's not like truly independent feeds of audio that are coming out. And so there's still some limitations there that we'll still use our larger hardware. The disadvantage of using that larger hardware is that we are that we have higher latency. We've actually doubled the latency because it has to go through our hardware, then back up to Zoom, then back to them. And so by pulling ZoomISO, you cut your latency in half, which is definitely makes it feel snappier when you're talking to folks. It also becomes very scalable. So instead of having, right now, I've got 16 PCs that sit there and they do the individual ISO, one at a time into our system. With ZoomISO, I have 5, right now 5, and it'll be 6, but 5 computers that are, each one of them is pushing 4 signals out of it. So it's got, we're doing SDI, so it's got, each one is pushing 4 out of a Duo card into a router and then into the constellation. And what that does is a couple things. One is I can theoretically record all those ISOs if I wanted to. So I can record all the ISOs across there at 1080p. I'm also requesting 1080p of everybody, which means that I'm going to get, it's going to make everything will look clearer. Even when you look at, because I can now cut back and forth and there's no ramp up that's happening in Zoom. I'm using a MV16. You could also theoretically use you could use the multi-view from your constellation as a 16 up. You just have to build a mortise that's thick enough to cover the lines on the edges. So if you turn off the labels, you can do that as well. The interesting thing about it is that, so you can get 16 ups or do whatever, however you want to set those up so that you can build a quote unquote gallery view back into it. So you're not, instead of using super sources, just use an MV. You can do a 4 up, a 9 up, a 16 up for that if you wanted to rebuild the grid, so to speak. The interesting thing about it is what we're doing with Office Hours 2.0, or when I say we, I mean Andy, is tying this together so that, and there's a little bit of what we're doing. So like this new question answering thing that we have in the back end, I can build super sources in the atem from who I selected in Mukana. so it automatically generates those, or it will be probably by the end of this week. And so it'll be automatically generating those sources there. We're going to work on building up a couple of these tests this week. And so, but that's really interesting. And I can put lower thirds automatically across all of them because it knows who they are. The interaction between ZoomISO, ZoomOSC, Mukana, and the API for Blackmagic gives us an enormous, and Mix Effect Pro. And so all of these things are being pulled together to create a different kind of show, and so you'll see more of that. We're very, very, very close to the surface now. So we'll probably, if things go well this week, next week or the week after, we'll start having a day a week at least where we're running it for the show, and it'll be horrible when we start, but it'll get better. We'll fail forward. All right, next question.
Next question comes in from Douglas Carmichael, and he says, Carl mentioned splitting the output of a Roland Phantom into 3 stereo stems, drums, sequences, and live solo synth. If you had a boutique pair of channel strips, say a Neve Sheffield channel, for example, which of the 3 would you send through them?
With Carl, not here, I'm not sure if we have the right answer. Carl's been a little under the weather, so he showed up yesterday. We talked to him a little bit. There's nothing wrong. I mean, he'll be fine, but he's getting some rest. I think when he's hanging out with us, it's the middle of the night in Australia, and so I think he pushed his system a little too hard. So but he's out. I don't know what Carl was thinking there. So I know I'm trying to find ways to get as many channels out of the system as possible as I kind of play with it, so that I can put it into Atmos. And so I'm fiddling with a variety of these devices. So I kind of broke down, and I'm getting X32 and then piping all my little synths out into it, so that each one of them has their own individual inputs, so that I can make that all work. So we'll keep playing with that. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Will DeWitt in Charleston, South Carolina. Has anyone had any experience with Zoom events versus Zoom web conference?
Go ahead, Rupert.
So certainly as an attendee, I'm going to read the question as meaning Zoom webinar rather than web conference. But Zoom events is basically a wrapper for webinars or even meetings that takes care of things like ticketing and organization with your audience, promoting your event. And then once you're in, it'll do the chat and audience engagement and stuff like that. So it's really not a comparison, it's a added set of features.
You go ahead, David.
Yeah, we actually just did last week on Zoom Test Kitchen. We had Joey Meehan from Zoom Events there. He did a full walkthrough. Beware, he uses a virtual background the entire time. But he also mentioned that if you want to play around with Zoom Events, hop over to Zoomtopia because they're using the Zoom Events platform for that.
Yeah, I think that everything I've seen so far, and I'm definitely going to try to keep track of it, is it seems like it's just an incremental patch, to what Zoom already has. And Zoom Events doesn't seem like it's anything dramatic. It just seems like, and I think that Zoom has an opportunity. They don't need to do anything. They're doing fine on their own, but they have the opportunity to really step beyond it and create real events. And you see what Andy's doing with what he's up to with what we're putting together for Office Hours 2.0. That is the future, and you see Tony Mobley's show, and you see the Belfast Method, and you see, what other people here are doing is figuring out how to take Zoom and turn it into a real broadcast, because it's not just that it's a real broadcast. It is that it is pleasurable to watch, and it fits more into people thinking that it's a professional experience. Putting a wrapper onto webinar is not solving that problem. Next question.
Moving on to Douglas Carmichael's question, would it be possible to use a Blackmagic Design HyperDeck as an instant replay machine for sports with some custom code to talk to it, or would you need a higher end product?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I tried doing something like this just for bookmarks and found it fairly difficult using the API and using the go to a time code, and that's the only way you can really access bookmarks on the HyperDeck, I think, unless they've changed the API. It's been a couple of years since I've tried it, but all the HyperDecks are all file-based systems, so you can't really record while you're playback while you're recording. So you got to stop your recording, go into playback, go to a specific time code. You could write software that would just, as you're watching, you just tap a button and it would save the time code at that point and build a list. And then stop recording and then go to playback and then just go down your list of timecode bookmarks to go to that, and then throw it into jog mode or shuttle mode and to give you control over instant replay. So it could kind of be used, but most of the EVS systems and TiVo and those kinds of things are designed not based on a standard file system, because they have the ability to record while there's playback while they're still recording continuously.
Go ahead, Will.
I definitely think you would probably need something higher end, but if you wanted to try and do it on the cheap, look into either just macros or BitFocus Companion. They may have some scripting tools that you could use to get into that.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I mean, a real replay system never stops recording, so it's just the sliding window. So, you may have like 3 minutes of footage that's just rolling around. You can't replicate that on a HyperDeck.
Go ahead, Doug.
I own 4 HyperDecks, and there's an app called HyperSlow that works on the iOS. I played with it a couple times, but I own a 3-play system, so that's a true replay system. But you can check out it's called HyperSlow. It does cost to use it, but you can give it a shot.
Also, the JL Cooper makes a actual controller to do replay and so on and so forth. Now, again, it has the same problem that you need to close the write before you can read. So that's an issue. But JL Cooper actually makes a really nice little controller to do play out and kind of set things up for it for a HyperDeck. The other things, 3Play is another one that's incrementally more expensive. I don't know how much it is. What's the price, Doug? I don't know what the current rate.
It's like $20,000 for
$20,000, yeah.
And that's 4 in, 2 out.
Yeah, and then a less expensive solution on the Mac is Softron has an M Replay, which can take up to 8 inputs, I believe, through and be pulling all of those signals, and you can actually set up replay, and it's a software / hardware ingest system that you can use as well. So that's another thing to think about. Go ahead, Jason.
I didn't want to bring up HyperSlow. I have played with it. If memory serves, the only time I was ever able to get it completely sturdy required something like 2 or 3 HyperDecks for how far I wanted to go back. And it does this weird thing where it will cut between the two. I never really managed to get it to work in a predictable way.
Next question.
Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota is up next with, would it makes any sense to get QHD or 2560 by 1440 resolution monitors? I've seen them on blowout sales lately.
Go ahead, Rupert.
If you are working at those resolutions or producing content, then maybe. But if you're not, and you're doing things more like Zoom or just streaming to the web at 1080 or screen sharing, if you get those monitors and run at those resolutions, you're just putting maybe more load on your system, using more bits to get what you need on your screen. And if you are screen scraping or screen sharing, you've got to look at how well your machine is going to downsample that resolution into 1080, and actually how well the monitor itself will show you 1080 if that's what you're displaying on it.
Next question.
Rupert McCrae, who was just speaking from Dallas, Texas, says, does anyone like to sit at a high desk on a stool-height chair? Are there any chair preferences for this use case along the lines of Aeron quality? These can sometimes be called architect chairs.
Go ahead, Aaron.
My dad is an architect, and he sat on one of these Aeron stools for his whole career.
There you go.
They make a stool version of
like
that. They make a stool.
Aeron, you can have, or you can Aeron, you can actually have an Aeron stool.
Aeron.
Aaron is correct. Go, Jason.
+1 on that one. I'm always at a standing desk, and when you see me shifting and moving, it's because I'm on this little bar stool looking thing, but oh boy, have I looked at that stool. It looks really nice.
And then you look at your wallet, then you look at
anybody check the price? Yeah.
You look at the wallet, then you look at the stool. All right, next question.
Let's see. Adrian Allback in Brisbane, Australia says, if I need to de-embed audio going to a Blackmagic Design SmartView 4K monitor, is it better before or after the monitor input?
Jason.
Well, that depends if you want the monitor to have the audio or not. It should not matter as long as your clock source is stable. I really don't.
And if
think
you're passing through it, if you're just passing through it, you can put them. I would typically put the monitor on the end because I wouldn't want to. If I'm de-embedding it, I'm assuming that I need to use that audio for something, and so I wouldn't want to put it on the far end of the monitor. That means if the monitor gets unplugged, you lose signal. So I would probably put it before. Next question.
Rupert McCrae again from Dallas says, when is it worthwhile to build your own PC, particularly for paid live production? Surely name brand manufactured equipment with professional warranty and service is the wisest choice there.
Go ahead, Leo. And we're going to go pretty quick, everybody. We're running out of time. So
I would absolutely say I would only ever go to name brand. This is the one that I always buy, which is the Dell Precision 5820. These machines come out, you buy them with everything, that they're built to do streaming. They weren't built to do streaming. They were built to do AI, but these machines are rock solid, and everything that they can do is built. They're super quiet. And the other reason to buy them at the moment is that you can't buy NVIDIA cards on their own. In fact, it's easier to buy them straight from the manufacturers who have actually got them.
We're going to move really fast, 10 seconds each. All right, go ahead, George.
Step down from Leo, Dell 3930, RTX 4000. Order naked, buy without all the memory and drives, and put in your own. Very cost effective.
Go ahead, Jason.
The only time to buy a computer is when you enjoy building it, and it can be fun. But yeah, if you're using it professionally, just spend some money.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, if you're getting paid for it, just make sure you're getting paid enough for it.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I yield my time. Ditto to what they said.
Yeah, all I'd say is Puget Systems also makes great high-performance systems that you might want to look at as well. You're going to get something that is really custom-built for what you need. Next question.
Comes from Joseph in Ontario, Canada. Joseph says, is there an in-ear monitor that does not seal the ear canal and allows external sound and air in?
Real quick, Leo.
These ones I know it helps if I'm unmuted. So these are the bone connecting ones. They sit in front of your ears. So they sit there so you don't actually cover your ears at all. And you can listen to everything. They're absolutely brilliant. And the more people I show these to who actually have to call shows or have to listen to audio at shows, they're brilliant.
Hasmukh?
Yeah, I've been using Sidekick from Bumblebee, and they come with different ear tips. And I use the smallest one called Satellite, and that feels very comfortable, doesn't block the ear, and ventilates pretty.
The bumblebees are stunningly good. Stunningly. Go ahead, David.
I've been really happy with the MEE. Oh, sorry, it's not coming up. With the MEE audio M6s, $50.
That's great. Rupert?
So for more of an IFB style rather than monitors for critical listening, I use these tips where it'll just go in the ear and around. It doesn't actually block your hearing. I wear this thing all day, and I can still have complete kind of airflow and spatial awareness.
And standard broadcast is an audio implements, and you can get a cast of your ear, and then they're going to give you one that can be opened. And that's what almost all broadcasters use, is they have open air and they are able to hear it. Next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Any recommendations for hardware, software tools, or techniques to evaluate cellular or Wi-Fi signal strength when selecting the position of your aerial antenna locations on site for a live event?
Go ahead, Rupert.
So on the cell signal side of things, generally I've found that there's more availability of more detailed apps on the Android platform, because those apps can get closer integration to the radios and really give you some high level stats. Unify also has a good app that will do Wi-Fi, I think cross-platform, but when it really gets to anything detailed on Wi-Fi analysis, I go for the MetaGeek range of products. They take Wi-Fi to almost like the spectrum analysis level, and will give you heat maps of your entire RF environment.
You said that's MetaGeek?
MetaGeek, yeah.
Next question.
Joseph in Ontario, Canada says, what side address microphone can you recommend that costs no more than a PR40?
Does no one raise their hand? I'd say an SM7B or SM, is that right? 7B or 7B? Go ahead, Courtney, real quick.
Yeah. All right, clicked on it 4 times. The Stellar X2, which I'm talking to you now on, it's a side address large diaphragm condenser. It's $200. It mimics a Neumann U87, and I think it sounds good.
That's good. Next question.
Brett Ramsey in Melbourne, Australia. StreamYard held an event last Thursday announcing several new features, including changes to file storage and the ability to create an embed code without using a CDN and external file sharing. Anybody else watch? And if so, what do you think?
Go ahead, Leo, real quick.
Yeah, I watched it, but both of these features are playing to, I'm not sure where the market that they're trying to play this to. I think it's more to do with the hop-in connection, as I can't see that there's going to be a great deal of use. And if you can't download your files within 15 days and have the plans to do it, then I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
I was there. I was just going to say also, I was most impressed by the integration with hop-in more than anything.
Next question.
Juan Z. Robles in Mexico comes to us next with this new panelist view, will be reinstated the notes on the questions to add links and stuff and such?
No, in fact, we're actually researching shortening the questions again. So you know, the main thing is that it has to do with the notes as they go to YouTube or as we save them. We're going to leave it the same as it is now, but we're definitely not going to make them any longer. You know, the goal for this is to keep them at a place that we can read them comfortably. When we had notes, they were it made it actually hard for us to read them. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael has our last regular question today, and it's one of the activities that my alma mater mentioned as a selling point for in-person was the college radio station. Could the Belfast or Mobley models be applied to non-commercial broadcasting while still respecting FCC national authority rules?
Go ahead, Leon.
There's lots of ways of doing radio on the internet, and there's lots of models of doing it. And in fact, actually, radio is far, far simpler to do than it is for video. In the big thing about both of those models that you talk about is the switching of the video. If you're switching the audio like that on radio, you're not quite doing radio the way there is ways to do it, but I would say they aren't the models.
I'll say that the FCC and the way that they set that up destroyed the opportunity for radio online. Like, it was just dumb. Like, we knew it when they did it. This was 20 years ago. They set the royalty rules so high that it made it impossible, because the radio stations were trying to survive. Like, instead of like embracing the future, you know, we see this movie over and over again. This is what happens, right? So this is the movie that we see, is the incumbent goes, let's make it impossible for someone to get in. And then they make it hard, and then they get in anyway. You know, something else happens around it that makes them completely, rather than being somewhat out of control, They are completely written out of the project process. That's what comes when you resist an inevitable future, is that you're just written out of the entire process. And so radio has been basically pushed off to a point where we don't even consider it. And there's one last bit that when it happens, it'll be the end. But anyway, it hasn't happened yet. So we'll see what happens. All right, let's jump in. Now we're going to change subjects, and we have our own Hasmukh Gajjar from Cape Town, and Hasmukh is one of the OGs here, and has really started with how do I use how do I get this started, and what do I do, and now he's running events in South Africa, and so and it's kind of a huge success story, and we cook with his wife Damayanti on Saturdays, and Hasmukh he's got all the cameras, and it sounds great, it looks great, and so it's been a huge process, and now Hasmukh, you put together. Can you tell us a little bit about the event? And by the way, as Hasmukh is giving us the breakdown of this, if you have questions, go ahead and throw them into Mukana. All right, Hasmukh, tell us a little bit about the event. What was the goal?
So this is University of Cape Town medical school there. That's and this is Groote Schuur Hospital. So this is the hospital where I was asked by the staff to manage this event. The hospital is well known. That was the first heart transplant at Groote Schuur Hospital by Chris Barnard in 1967. And Chris Barnard was quite a charismatic character, made Sophia Loren and all the luminaries. And in some ways, it was way above his head, so to speak. But he did bring the hospital into limelight globally. This is me. I graduated from that university in 1977. You'll notice the bell-bottom pants and platform shoes. But the most noticeable is the hair. Lots of hair.
That's great.
So that was my graduation. I was working with the Department of Medicine, and I was working with them, with the head of the department, Professor Ntobeko Ntusi, really trying to get them to digitize their department. Very, very manual, they still pin notice boards to announce things to students, and everybody walks around with a smartphone, and I just couldn't get this. When the pandemic hit, I proposed to them that we actually do some educational videos on COVID. So we actually went into the hospital and recorded the actual specialist in the infectious diseases department to communicate to the audience here all about the pandemic. Language is important in South Africa. So we did this COVID educational video in 4 languages. We did it in English. The second sort of more popular language, not popular, but in the past popular, was Afrikaans. And then 2 ethnic languages called Xhosa and isiZulu. So this was very successful. In fact, it went quite viral across the continent. So I think we gave the department quite a leg up and a prominence on the continent in showing some kind of digital initiative. So from hero to zero is what the department went, digitally speaking. So these are the various languages we did. They hold after your graduation, you do your specialty, and you write this exam called the Fellowship of the College of Physicians, and that stands for FCP. So the independent college, and then they run this exam twice a year. And what we were involved with is the part 1, which was a theoretical part, obviously not the clinical part. What they did is doctors all over the country, normally they had 120 to 150 doctors fly down to Cape Town. They obviously went into the hotels and B&Bs and then also had to take leave for those 4 days and the weekend. And they had 4 days of intensive lectures. There were 18 lecturers I counted probably well over 1,000 slides over those 4 days. So they were pummeled with information like you couldn't believe, and there was no room to breathe. So this was the in-person event. And Professor Ntusi asked, so how do I take this annual event that has been so successful to a digital platform? So I guess that was his request. So how do we go digital? And of course, I came to office hours and I put up my hand and I said, okay, how do we do this? And based on the advice and input we got, we kind of drew up a plan on how we can manage this. 6 months is a long time. So this was in January and I was still very green at that time, Alex. So not as evolved as I am because I wasn't doing cooking shows those days. And as you know, one of our panelists, Grant, is very involved with medical events. I organized a meeting on office hours between the panelists and the medical team at Groote Hospital and also with Grant, because I could discern they had zero confidence in me pulling this off. So I was advising them as to, based on what we had suggested here, and I'll give the plan how we did it. But I think once they, especially when they had this meeting in a panel, and when you spoke, Alex, you could just see the lights go on and they were all very comfortable. And from there onwards, there was just no turning back. And obviously Grant added a lot more to that. So the plan was really to pre-record all the lectures rather than have the live event where each lecturer present their slide deck like they do an in-person meeting. I think based on a suggestion and input we got from panelists and others in office hours, we decided to record all the lectures beforehand. So we got every lecturer to come into our studio. And you can see it was, as I said, little green at that time. I'm using an iPhone 12 Pro, I think, as the camera that recorded the lecture. And he had a lapel mic on. That's one of the lecturers there. And he used his notebook to go through the slide deck. And we were recording the actual lecture, but the team were going to do the post production work, edit the lecture into a reasonable video that included the slide deck and the actual lecture. And so just to show how green we were, I put a Brio camera to point at that lecturer's monitor so that we could record on a separate computer exactly where he was pointing, because this was a very technical presentation. So if he says like left coronary artery or the splenic vein and they're pointing it to in the slide, the team who are not medically trained had to figure out where to highlight in the post-production that particular video. So, but then I thought, heck, there's a better way. So we got rid of the Brio and then we used ScreenFlow. So we loaded ScreenFlow on the lecturer's computer and we recorded the pointer as they pointed through the slides. And we just said to them, just present as you would present into a lecture. Let us worry about how we manage your actual slide deck in a post-production in the video. So that was quite successful because the team were zippy with exactly where to zoom in. So let's say they were showing the left coronary artery. It was a small sketch and the team would zoom into that in the video. And I think that added considerable value to the learners as they went through the video. We then put these up on a learner platform. We didn't have enough time in January, but we had about a week. So we put each lecture on the learner platform. And we use something called Talent LMS. And we opened this up to all the learners and they went through all the lectures. Now, the big thing that we were sensitive about is that during COVID and with the pandemic, these learners were on call in very odd hours, and they had issues looking after patients. So they had to grab whatever time they had to learn. So we needed to make sure that they can learn when they want to, where they want to, any time of 24/7. So that's what we did then, is we asked them to install the mobile version of this learner platform so that they could watch the content even during their when they were on duty, so to speak. So this is just an image, and if we have time, I'll show you the screenshots of the platforms. But we put up all those lectures there, cardiology, nephrology, pulmonology, and so on and so on. And they could just go ahead and go through each of the videos. We loaded the actual lecture itself. That means the combination of the presentation and the slide deck. And we also uploaded the slide deck as a secondary component in the learner platform. So if they wanted to zip through the slide deck, they could do that, or they could watch the entire lecture. So that's really what we did. And we then also uploaded PDF documents and all ancillary documents that they need on the subject matter. So if there's a white paper or something in a journal that the lecturer wants everybody to be aware of, we included that as well.
So, and the main thing is they're getting this a week or two before. Or is it a week before?
Exactly.
2 weeks before?
At least a week. When we did it in June, they had 2 weeks. So this was a week before.
Yeah. So basically, they get a whole week they get all the content. They're not gonna. You're getting out of the way the lecture part. You're not gonna try to use up their live time, which is really valuable with lectures.
So maybe I should just complete the strategy, which was then to upload the content, make the content available, and then use the live event just for Q&A. So this somewhat mesmerized the lecturers themselves and was initially quite off-putting because they said, "What do you mean I must answer questions for 1 hour? I don't do that. I only answer questions for 5 minutes." I said, "Well, that's the whole point. The whole point is that
we're trying to pull you back to what people actually need rather than what you're doing."
Yeah, and I said, instead of speaking to 120 people in the lecture hall, and you're not quite sure who's asking the question, I'm going to make sure that you see the person that's asking you the question, and you can have a conversation with that person. And I think it was only after the fact that everybody understood the value of it. And so I'll talk about that, how this went down so well. We also used Monday.com, which we normally use for our own operation. It's kind of like a project management tool. We use it extensively in our operation so that it has built-in notifications based on the status changing. But I'll show you what we did. What we did do is we tried to manage the relationship between us as the service provider and the hospital. Now, me being a medical doctor didn't quite help because that separation got quite blurred often. So I had to make decisions on behalf of the department, which made me very uncomfortable. So what we did is we pushed down to the admin at the hospital to say, you need to put the stuff on Monday.com from your administrative stuff, and we will do the technical stuff. And we used Monday.com for that. And that was just a view of Monday.com. We obviously used Discord. So in Discord, what we did is we created a channel for every specialty. So cardiology, nephrology, each one had a channel. And what we did is we had to cajole and push and sometimes threaten the lecturers to be on Discord. It was all new for almost all of them, Discord. And most of the attendees felt a little also uncomfortable having to use another app. But clearly, during the event, with them having to grab any minute, 5 minutes to quickly catch up on cardiology or something, now they have a question. We got them to ping that in Discord for the specialist. And we had a specialist respond to those questions 24/7. And then in Discord, we had a technical channel as well. And so my team monitored that technical channel if they had any difficulty with the learner management platform or the lecture or any of the issues. I myself was on 24/7 for those 2 weeks. And really it was around making sure that we respond adequately, quickly, so that these doctors who are already under pressure, tremendous pressure, do not have any hassles in terms of response time. So they found that, I think that sort of constant, they say you go online. We said you are online all the time. You don't have to go to it. You are online. And that allowed the connectivity between the students who were all over the country. So for the first event, we had 120 doctors. For the second event, we had 58 doctors. And they were across South Africa, and some were across the continent as well. Namibia, Botswana, Malawi, Swaziland, and even 2 doctors from Libya who actually flew down to South Africa thinking it's an in-person event. And they sat in their B&B going through this, and they said, wow, this is better than sitting in the lecture hall, because now I have this personal connection with the lecturer. And so overall, I think it was the lecturers themselves were maybe not as optimistic, so were the attendees, but the stakeholders that appreciated this the most were these doctors under stress, managing patients, learning to do their specialty. So that was very, very effective. That's just a picture of how we did the channels in Discord. And what I did do is, as you have emphasized very often, is we went through each doctor. I went through 140 doctors over those 2-week period, making sure, and I'll quickly go through what we did, but making sure that they were ready for this digital event, because for almost all of them, this was new and the first time. I don't know if you have any questions at this stage, Alex.
We have a ton of questions. Well, let's jump into a couple of questions and we'll go through it. So let's jump to the questions, Bill.
Okay, the first one actually is more a comment than a question, and he says that. It's from Mike Emmett in Melbourne, Australia. He says, I just wanted to say that I discovered Office Hours via recommendation to the cooking show, and even though I produced dozens of cook-alongs, this has really changed my thinking about the power of being genuine.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, it's yeah, that's a whole. We'll do a breakdown of that when we figure it out. we're still working through it, but it's amazing experience. Let's go to the next question.
Next one from Charlie Nancaro in Melbourne, and he says, George, Hasmukh, and Aaron's video looks a lot sharper and more fluid than the other panel's video, although Alex's color is impeccable. What equipment are they using, and is it internet quality or 50-60 hertz a factor?
I'm using a GH5 on a gigabit Ethernet.
I don't know what that would be, but let's go jump to the next question. Sorry, it's not good. We're gonna stick with the one near the event for now, but ask that one in a general like tomorrow, and we'll dig through it. Next question.
First time I'm using my 6K in office hours.
Okay. Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas is up next. He says, do you think digital first medical collaboration contributes to life-saving outcomes?
I think that this has changed completely in terms of ongoing learning and ongoing education, particularly in medicine. You have to keep up with journals. That was the traditional way of going through journals. Now I think more and more you'll have online, real-time collaboration and discussions around many different vertical specialities. So my thinking is like all of us, that digital first is going to play more and more dominant role.
Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas comes back again with, how do you think your event participants, both presenters and attendees, will take forward their experiences from your event, and will they demand better experiences from the other types of events they may attend in the future?
Well, we did a poll at the end of the first event, and we asked them, if you had a choice of an in-person event or a digital event, which one would you prefer? And in January, we probably had about 60, 70% who said they would prefer a digital event. The other 30%, I prefer in person. In June, when we did the event, 100% said digital event first. 100%. So that was quite a big number.
That's a big number. That's but I think that's what I think that one of the reasons that we were really excited about having you here was to really underline that, is that when we do this well, when we execute it, people are no longer looking back at this is a good, holdover until we get back to physical events. It's better. That's great. Next question.
Comes from Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, California. And Gordon says, when you're pitching a digital first event without the benefits of a tag team, like an Alex or a Grant, which elements would you include in the presentation, and what would be the most difficult selling points?
I think the need for people to replicate in-person events and try and port it to a digital platform. I mean, there was just this pessimism around how we're going to achieve it in a digital platform. So convincing those who provide the content and the information and the learning or the teaching is probably the biggest barrier. But for us, it was important that we convince the leadership. So when Prof. Ntuzi was convinced, he basically just gave the marching orders to everybody. So I think find somebody who's convinced in your strategy, make sure that they promote or are your supporter in that, and that's 70% of the battle.
Next question.
Rupert McRae is back again from Dallas, Texas with this question. Did you have attendees who would not have otherwise attended normally, and did digital first gain a wider audience for you?
That's hard to say. I think that this program has been running for a few years, and so the only thing they knew was to fly down. But I suspect those who were not able to take leave or fly down to Cape Town, especially from the neighboring countries. So they said to me that more neighboring country attendees in the digital event than the in-person event. So my guess is that in hindsight, most felt that this would, and the first event obviously promoted by word of mouth. So we kept the Discord going after the first event. And when the June event came, others were asking them questions. How did it go? And they themselves were our own promoters. So I think it opened up more options to the attendees.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next with, did you have any pushback from the IT security team for your use of Discord, a gamer-centric application, as the communications platform for this?
We emphasized a lot in terms of privacy and security. So we made everybody sign a terms of agreement for each one. And they had to sign it, all the attendees and the lecturers. And some of them were the things we do in office hours: real names, real locations, videos on all the time, image in Discord, the same image as they had when we did the briefing. The pre-event briefing, I knew exactly who I'm talking to. So, and those were also recorded. So then we could match that. So from a security point of view, we did what we needed to do, but I think the university found it useful to outsource this because then they didn't have to have all the other compliance issues. But we took the measures from a privacy and security point of view.
Next question.
Jasmine Lee in Singapore is up next. With your experience now, how would you assure event organizers and speakers that attendees will actually view the content pre-event and that there will be questions during the live session?
I suppose this is a little different in the sense that the attendees had an incentive to go through the content because they were writing the first part of their specialty exam, and there was no other means to get the teaching or the content. So there was a built-in incentive in the program for them to go through the content and go through it in such a manner that they could raise the questions that they had when they came to the live event.
Did you have any shortage of questions?
We ran out of every hour. So
ran out of time in every hour.
Yeah. So, I mean, where the lecturers were spending 5 minutes in the in-person event, we allocated them an hour. And so their first thought was, what questions do they have for an hour? And obviously, it's exactly the same as office hours. 1 or 2 people ask questions, others chime in, it becomes a conversation, leads to other questions. And every session, we had to have a clock down. We ran the clock down and say, we are 10, 15 minutes overtime. So we didn't run out of questions.
The interesting thing we found with a lot of this, with events that we've done where we've been able to post the content early and then have a discussion is that it doesn't matter whether everyone watched it or not. That there'll be 10, 15, 20% will watch, 10 or 15% is kind of the average. We'll actually watch the videos because they're still boring. But they'll follow along in the conversation, ask other questions, and the people who did watch it will sit there and ask a lot of questions, and then other people will chime in and being part of that conversation. It's actually a way that you can get to people who wouldn't watch the lecture. They'll actually sit in that conversation and listen to it and be part of it, and they'll get most of it, if not all of it, of what they were going to walk away from the lecture while they were checking their email and texting and doing whatever else they're doing during your lecture. They actually end up with more of it anyway.
Well, what happened is that in this last event in June, we encouraged them to ask questions on Discord.
Right.
And we had one of my team, similar to what Bill does, read out the question to the lecturer. And what happened is that I had all my super source set up where I would pin the person asking the question and the lecturer, and they would have the conversation, and that just didn't happen. So I said, well, there's a technical issue with Discord, so don't ask your questions on Discord anymore. Raise your hand and ask the question in a live event. And that just spurred more questions. And what actually happened is that the attendee is asking the question directly to the lecturer. And so the lecturer could see the person asking the question and also have this emotional connection instead of having it in Discord.
Right.
And others could see that this conversation is leading to knowledge building, that they're sharing some information that they didn't have. So there would be, like, let's say for diabetes, the latest therapy and certain complications and certain local issues. And as the conversation happened, people would put up their hands and say, well, in my area, I have this particular profile. And how do I manage this? And so it became very, very conversational.
Next question.
Aaron Husledge here from Durham, North Carolina says, can you talk about the team you put together? How big was it? And what sorts of positions did you create?
Well, the team was me, but I over the second event, I had 3 Mac Minis, into the event. So now one Mac Mini, we had, it was an attendee, and one of my staff would then pin the person asking the question. And that would then grab, from SuperSource, I would grab that pin and bring it into the meeting. Another person would, the second person would obviously welcome everybody into the meeting. She also participated in the briefing a week ahead, so that she knew exactly who the people, and so part of the security measure was that my team had to make the connection with the individual coming in. So we had to verify that the person is a genuine person. So there were two. The third one was somebody was controlling the the second Mac Mini, which was the slide deck Mini. So if the lecturer had a particular problem with the slide deck and they wanted to quickly scan the slide, the third person would remotely control that Mac Mini so that the lecturer presenter didn't have to touch that machine. So one of the things I did, I said, you're not going to touch the machine. We're going to control the slide. So he would basically say next slide, and so we managed to control that as well. And then there were the person that asked the questions from Discord. That was the fourth person. And the fifth person was my overall manager, who basically answered all the technical questions at the back end. So all in all, we had about six people in the team, including myself.
Great. Next question.
Comes from Aaron Husledge again. He says, did you have any Zoom fatigue pushback?
No, surprisingly. And I think we did insist that everybody keeps their video on at all times. And this was part of the terms of agreement. They actually had to sign this. If they did not sign, they were not admitted into the course. So the things they had to sign was, I will keep my video on at all times. I will mute when I'm not speaking. In Discord, I'll have my first name, last name, and my picture of myself. And there were a couple of others, but they had to sign this. And the university was very hesitant. He said, how can we put all these conditions down to these attendees? I said, they want to pass this exam and they want this content. So they will sign anything I put in front of them. So
this gets into the calculation I always put is, action occurs when possibility is greater than circumstance.
Absolutely.
When the possibility is I want to pass my thing. There's a lot of circumstance. The higher that possibility is, the more circumstances you can just keep stacking on top of that.
Yeah.
They'll keep on doing it.
So Zoom fatigue wasn't a problem because everybody had their videos on all the time. And then if anybody switched off their video for more than a minute, my technical person would just push them into the waiting room. How can I help you? Is there a problem with your video? And they would bring them back again.
That's great. All right.
Sorry, Alex. In fact, in the first event in January, a person refused to change their name in Discord. So I bumped him out of Discord. Yeah. And man, did he make a noise. And in a post-mortem at the faculty, they said, we had this problem. I said, well, he was just one that gave us a problem. Imagine all of them giving us a problem. How do we manage the security? Yeah.
How many?
Go ahead.
I had one follow-up. How often did you take breaks? Was it between everything or?
Yeah, so they had that's the other thing that they did, which I found kind of strange, because they scheduled this just like they schedule an in-person event. I said, we don't have to start 3:00 in the afternoon on a Friday because everybody's online already, because normally people would fly down to Cape Town in the morning and then come to the lecture. So they provided sufficient breaks. So there were 3 lectures. So that means 3 hours, 3.5 to 4 hours. then probably a 15 to 20-minute break, and then a lunch break as well. So there were sufficient breaks.
Next question.
Georgie Kennedy, our friend in Washington, D.C., says, Hasmukh, how many did you have on staff to help vet the 140 speakers?
We were a staff of 6 that managed this
and
entire
that was
event.
the same team that vetted all the. How many people were actually vetting the?
Yeah. So in Monday.com, the university administration would insert the individuals with what we have a national ID book, identity book. So the identity number, their telephone, mobile number, first name, last name, hospital they work. So we had a database going into the system. And we would then, we insisted that they come to the pre-meeting. If they didn't attend the pre-meeting, again, they couldn't get into the course. So they had to attend the pre-meeting. So the verification was done by the medical faculty. We took that data and matched it to the live person. So that's really how we did it.
Next question.
Josh Kaufman of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania says, you mentioned that there was some convincing required to sell your idea of a digital first event. Was the financial advantages put forward as a motivation to adopt this method over in-person events?
You know, some people call me Gandhi because I keep giving things away. And, and I said the only thing I have in common with Gandhi, he died poor. Now, I was going to do this entire event on a pro bono basis because we did those COVID videos for them. But this entire event so astounded them that they just felt obliged. No, we need to compensate you for this. And they said, just raise the invoice that you would commercially. So I did, and I shaved something off. I must tell you, Alex, they paid me enough to pay for all my hardware I've invested since office hours from day one to today.
Great.
That's great. And they got a great deal from doing that.
Yeah, you deserve it. Seriously.
Yeah, that's great. Next question.
Ranjan Chandil in Los Angeles is up next. The medical community has a very specific way in which they accept information. Where would this presentation be presented to have a larger impact on the medical community globally? A session in another conference or a YouTube video or something like that?
I think being a doctor myself helped a lot. So it was quite strange when these lecturers came into my office. They thought I was just part of the crew, a technician, and they started treating me as such, very disdainfully, as some very highly qualified doctors may do from time to time. So I yanked out my graduation certificate and I plotted right on the wall so that they would walk in. Oh, you're a doctor. I said, yes, I'm a doctor as well. And that kind of just leveled the playing field almost immediately. So I think we need evangelists from the discipline itself, any vertical, whether it's a lawyer or a doctor, you know, to evangelize a digital event. And they would know as specialists in that vertical, the nuances within those disciplines or how to treat these interpersonal skills within that discipline. So I think that I'm actually looking forward to the faculty putting on more events, which I'm busy with. So they're going to bring on more and more of their lectures and postgraduate and undergraduate and help us to do this. So I was very interested in that ZoomISO.
Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas next. How much physical on-site space? Whoops, I'm sorry, I read the wrong one. What might you add to or remove from your event next time around?
Can you repeat that, Bill?
Sure. It's what might you add to or remove from your event next time around?
I'll most certainly not sit next to the talent because with the mix pre, I had an in-ear mic, a secondary mic, And it was very difficult for me to say anything to them because I had a shotgun mic for them as the lecturer. And so I couldn't say much. So I would definitely move out as the technical director or producer out of the actual studio itself. Most certainly, I want to explore more the super sources that I used. I used mix effects for the entire event and switched in the various presentations, whether it was the lecturer and the slide deck or the lecturer and attendee. It worked very seamlessly. So the other thing I did is, instead of using a HuddleCam, which we did in January, this time I used the 6K for the entire event. And so whatever we learn in office hours, you bet your dollar that I'm going to be including it. So I'm very keen to learn ZoomISO. I did not use the Streamdeck as much as I thought I would, but Streamdeck would become a very important tool for me in the event. What changed the entire event was the atem Extreme ISO. No question about it.
Next question.
Aaron Huslidge, Durham, North Carolina, here on the panel. Has this created a durable community as a result of doing the conference this way?
I think so. I think that we had 2 events that we did a follow-up, smaller events, but that was to capture a very small conference live, and we recorded the entire conference. And I think it helped us because we in the video business in terms of production, so we could actually take all that content, whether we recorded in Zoom itself or as ISO in the atem, and we could re-edit those to their requirements and then distribute that content across Africa. So a lot of the content we've produced has been distributed on a pan-African basis. In fact, one of the largest insurance companies use some of the content for their own internal training, for which we got a small fee.
Next question.
Rupert McRae back from Dallas with how much physical on-site space was required for this digital first event?
I have a 15 square meter office and a 10 meter square office, and it was more than adequate.
That's an important point. Next question.
Georgie Kennedy Jr., Washington, D.C. How did you fare with the technical side as far as hardware, cameras, and audio and that kind of things? Did everything work okay?
I did pretty well. So did the hardware. So like today also, I restarted my host machine. I switched off the atem and restarted it. So now I've got a kind of a routine that I go through to make sure that everything works smoothly. Very, very fortunate that most of the hardware worked. I used the atem Mini Pro for the first event. During the event, I had to, the camera failed, so I had to switch off the atem and switch it on again, but we were back online.
When you say failed, is it that it didn't log into a new event? That's the typical Zoom bug.
Exactly.
Yeah, and one question just to follow up on that is,
sure.
Do you find that doing the cooking, for instance, just because you're using it all the time, do you think that helps prepare you for the digital, more the next gen digital events?
Yeah, I think again, you cannot believe how infused I am with office hour, what I've learned here. So whatever I've learned here, I acquired the hardware as I went along, whether it's the MixPre or the atem or a Streamdeck. And I had to figure out, how do I practice this? Right. So last year with Damayanti, we said, why don't we cook for the family? And we set this up. And she initially found it quite elaborate. She said, you have to spend all this time setting this up, and is it really worth it? I said, you just cook. I want to practice managing an event. So, and then I did a family event as well. So that practice helped me a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas. Did the client need to purchase or make capital investments into production hardware?
None whatsoever.
Next question.
And the last one we have in our queue at the moment from Rupert McRae is, was this event done in 1080p in Zoom? And were Zoom data center regions selected to suit the geography of the event?
The first event was done on the entry-level paid for Zoom account. The second event, I used the university's Zoom license, which gave me 1,000 users for that. And they also had 1080p. So I ran the June event entirely on 1080p.
And I think that there's a huge difference there also. I really feel like when I realized for a long time when people talk about Zoom fatigue and getting tired of Zoom, I realized that they're used to looking at everybody at a very low resolution. Like most people using Zoom are using a very, very low resolution version of it. And we live in a different world where everything's 1080p, or at least 720. And it is a very, very different experience. Next question.
And actually, we got a couple more that came in. So the first one of those from Rupert McRae in Dallas, was there any recognition of the environmental savings provided by your digital first in terms of attendees not having to travel?
Yeah, in South Africa, we're a little obtuse as far as environmental things are concerned. We don't measure the environmental impact, but I think not having to travel during the pandemic and the ease with which they could learn from home was definitely uppermost in their response when I did the poll.
Next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. What was your support team's core competencies? For example, subject matter with medical, information technology, or video production. And if you had to redistribute this talent for the next time, would you make any changes?
Yeah, I realized that I have to invest in more training because they are full-time video editors. That's what they do. And so the 5 of them plus the administrator who deals with Monday and Discord and the other stuff. But they see me every day in office hours. I mean, I'm not in my operation at all. Zero involvement. So they see me every day playing with my toys, as they say. But 2-3 days before the event, we went through a dry run and explain each person's role, especially pinning during a event so that I could bring them into a super source, or how, and being very computer literate, remotely controlling the slide deck or any of the other Mac Minis remotely, they had no problem with it. But they added a lot of value in terms of compositing the content, both pre-event and post-event. So what we did do is that after the event, each event that was recorded, we edited that as well and put that up on the Learner platform. So not only did they watch the pre-event lectures, they also watched the post-event. So they could go through the session online as well.
Next question.
Roscoe Jones, up next from the panel here often. How does being an after-hours host improve your online presence? And thank you for doing this.
We jump in and do what we need to do. So participating in office hours had certain domestic discussions. Jumping into after hours had added more domestic discussions. But I think we've passed that point right now. So I'm mindful of how I host when I'm hosting the meetings in after hours. So no, it's quite comfortable actually, and I'm very happy that I can contribute and I participate in after hours because just in case I miss something smart, something new, a little lab, and that's where I picked up this Chris Fenwick's ZoomISO, and it perked my interest. I mean, I know about it, but when he started showing us how he uses it, that was very intriguing.
Yeah. Next question.
Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. How repeatable is your event model?
Absolutely repeatable. I can box it and package it, but it does require passion. It requires commitment, and being in my discipline, the zeal is there. So I don't see it as servicing a client or a customer. I see it more as servicing these doctors who are working under unbelievable pressure. But it's quite, I guess the cooking show is a little bit more non-discipline. But I think when the lights go on, when you teach people, and that's the most important part of this, is teaching people, educating people. And what we do through this conversation, we constantly drill knowledge. The problem is the more you know, the less you know, and you keep coming back because you want to learn more and more.
Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas. How do you coach your speakers to maintain eye contact with the camera?
That was probably the most challenging part. So what I did is I got a large TV and I put the 6K in front of the large TV and then the grid view of the panel. So when they had to look at the grid view, they were looking at the camera. Not the ideal, but they in fact did very well for first timers in terms of looking at the camera. But I coached them when they came to do the lecture. So when they came to the lecture, I ran through exactly how the process works during the live event, and constantly reminding them on Discord, please remember to watch the camera. When they came in, I think we drilled enough into their heads that they needed to watch the camera. And often being in the same room, it was useful where I would get off my chair, walk around and point to the camera, watch the camera, and they would suddenly just look
up. A
up.
little light that just pops on every once in a while. Like,
exactly.
I'm here. Exactly. Next question.
Rupert McRae in again with, what types of cameras were typically used by your remote participants? And was there a minimal requirement?
Almost all of them used their laptops. And I wish we had enough time to, and maybe at another session, I'll go through exactly how I prepped them and how I orientated them. And we went through the detail. I think Jeff's little video about good wired connection, good light, good audio, all of those things, I went through with them in detail. Quite a few of them actually went out and bought a webcam. And I said to them, the Brio is freely available in South Africa, so go for it. So a lot of them bought Brios for their cameras, and most actually for audio used their mobile device headset. So explaining to them that don't rely on the computer microphone, wear a headset, listen in ear, and the mic is closer to the mouth, and it made a lot of sense to them. And during the pre-event, I made sure I tested everyone's audio, everyone. So 140 people. It was not funny, but it was worthwhile.
Next question.
Rupert McRae back from Dallas again. Was all of your event content recorded and made available for participants to watch again later?
Yes. We made the content available for 3 weeks after the event, and we closed it off a day after they wrote the exam.
Next question.
Comes from somebody named Mickey Macacor in the Philippines. Good to see you, Mickey. We have all been inspired by the Office Hours community in one way or another. What specific instance in this group made the gears turn, triggered you, and inspired you to take the lead and be incredibly successful in this event?
Wow, that's a loaded question. I'll be very honest. I find Alex extremely inspirational. His ability to transmit that excitement, that commitment, and the knowledge is inspirational. But that on its own would be, if I may say so, Alex, okay. But with the rest of the groupings in office hours, each one is inspirational in their own way. So I've had quite a few sessions with Mickey on audio chain and setting up my different mics and my either my MixPre or the Solar, with Grant, with Chris Fenwick, and so many of you, that each session has been inspirational. And what it does is it gives you, I learn from understanding the concept. I don't like somebody telling me, push this button, push that button, and it'll work. I need to understand, how does it work? Why does it work? So I can fix the problem myself when I have an issue. And most of the panelists have actually done that with me in a one-on-one conversation or in a group conversation. And what we've done is that one-on-one experience that I had to create the capacity and ability to do this is now really available in after hours. So it's very inspirational when that magic goes on. And like when Chris Fenwick went through that ISO, or when Jonas and them talked about how they managed Belfast. So I think that's what's inspiring me. Remember, I'm 70 now, and
well, you know, and I think that I know I'm inspired by what everybody else is taking from this and then running with it. You know, you just keep on, and what you did is amazing. And I, you took a lot of what we talked about and then ran with it, with precision, and force, and that's what it's going to take for us to. And the reason that I really wanted you to come up and talk about what you did is that I want to make sure people get that this is working. Like this idea of how to do these events and how to flip the quote unquote flip the classroom, how to engage the audience, how to make sure that it's there. And when you start seeing 100% of the people would rather do a digital first than a in person, we're getting somewhere. So I think that I'm just really, really inspirational, Hasmukh. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for the contribution since the beginning. I mean, it's just such a pleasure to have you here and inspiring for us as well. So thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. Remember, tomorrow we're going from conferences to music. We've got the remotes here. They're going to be showing off their new video. It's going to be a lot of fun. So make sure to tune in tomorrow. And for everyone else, we're going to jump into after hours right now.